Welcome to the next episode of Beyond Reps. In this episode, we're going to be mastering the basics of fitness. But first up, Charlie, how are you doing?
I am fabulous. Thank you for asking. Week 3 of my photo shoot prep. It's all going swimmingly, so progress is being made. I can't complain. Training is a bit up and down. I'm trying to push myself a little bit more. Obviously, we have our catch-ups now and then. But yeah, aside from that, I'm all good. Very little to complain about right now, aside from the gloomy weather. But yeah, life is swimmingly.
And your life must be swimmingly because your new lid is looking absolutely fresh, and you've clearly modelled it off someone who's also equally as
I
fresh, clearly. So yeah, we are twinning today, guys. It's the ultimate lid. It's the short back and side skin fade with a little bit of pulled forward. So yeah, I'm definitely cited as an inspiration for for Charlie's new lid. So. Good to hear you doing well, bro. Apologies to our fair listeners for the audio disparity / heavy breathing from myself in the first episode that we released. We have tried to adjust the audio at the minute, so hopefully I will lower my tone to match Charlie's soft notes coming from himself. And yeah, appreciate everyone who's managed to make it to the end of that episode, because having listened to it back, there's definitely still some opportunity here. But we are new, so please forgive us, and we will try to continue to bumble through to become experts at this. So in terms of the focus for today's episode, then as we said, we want to cover the foundations or the basics of fitness. That's the goal of the episode. So the way we want to structure this is we're going to review this through like the lens of someone who's either getting into training or wanting to take their training more seriously, similar to like a lifestyle client, maybe someone who like has a corporate job but they're looking to kind of build their physiques on the side. We're not targeting this back at like an IFBB pro bodybuilder or a pro athlete, so that's just important context to remember. And then, yeah, I'll hand over to Charlie for the aims.
Yeah, so aims of the podcast, consider this a content page, if you will. So starting off, we're going to explore like the fundamental exercises and principles that like form the cornerstone of a successful fitness journey. Any distractions that might come up with that, so like identify common pitfalls that people have, or like getting lost in the weeds, for example. Avoid any misinformation online, any charlatans that try to shove their opinion essentially down your throat, because there's obviously basics that work, and that's exactly what we're going to cover. Anything else is just probably a marketing scam to try and steal your hard-earned money. And then, you know, just provide some much needed simple steps to focus on getting started, stop you from getting overwhelmed, and just basically getting you started on your journey. We'll probably have an extra video at some point just to make that a little bit easier and how you can actually get started, whereas now we're just going to cover the basics: what training, sleep, nutrition, stress management, what all of that is, and how that actually affects your overall fitness journey.
So a structure we want to think about really when it comes to this is something that I thought up literally 20 minutes ago, which is we've all heard of the hierarchy of needs, which is sort of like the physiological and some of it's psychological as well, in terms of like the levels of importance that we need to think about. So, you know, sleep, hydration, sex drive, all that stuff's in your hierarchy of needs. So we're going to think about this as a hierarchy of needs, but for gains. Just to make it really, really simple. So I'm going to start off with the number one most important factor. So you need to listen to this one and you can switch off if you must, but this is the number one. And if we don't do this, then you're not going to get any results whatsoever. So it doesn't matter how good your sleep is, doesn't matter how good your nutrition is, doesn't matter how good your supplements are, if you're taking all the AG1 under the world. If you are not simply training, which is the first and most important factor in order to build your physique, then you're not going to get any results. The reason that training is the most important factor is because you need to give your body stimulus in order to grow. Like, it doesn't matter. You can sleep 8 hours every single night. You can consume a surplus of calories. But if you are not training, then there's no stimulus. So it sounds extremely basic because it is. But the most important thing is just to get yourself in the gym, get your adherence to the gym as well. Doing one session every like 4 weeks isn't going to make you any notable progress. But we just need to make sure that get yourself in the gym. You're not actually missing sessions, and then we can kind of sort of like titrate up from there. But the first thing you need to nail is your adherence. And then once you've nailed your adherence, so maybe you're going, I would suggest kind of like a minimum would be 2 times a week, preferably 3. I mean, I have got clients that have had results on 2 times a week, but the I'd say I'd say 2 is like the very bottom of the threshold. 3 is a bit more optimal, and I would say the maximum to kind of go to is 5 or 6. I've personally been up to 6 before. As I said, 6 training sessions per week. This is, and yeah, I found that really challenging because of if you like miss a session because life happens, then you try and get that session in on your rest day, but then that means that you're then going to run the next 6 days forward. So it can end up just being like a really quite aggressive cycle with like no rest in between. So I did like a push pull legs and then like a push pull legs. So it's like Monday through to Saturday was training, Sunday was off. So that is not really sort of my preference. My preference now for how I train is 5 days a week. I think that gives an optimal balance for recovery and also social activities outside of work, but also allows you to get enough stimulus in those sessions in order to make progress. So what that looks like for my personal training program in terms of adherence. So I will hit push on a Monday. I will hit legs on a Tuesday. I will hit pull on a Wednesday. Thursday I will take off, and then Friday I will hit push again, and then Saturday I will hit pull, but this will be more posterior, so like hamstrings in it. And then Sunday I'll take off. So the 2 rest days are split across the week. So adherence to those 5 sessions is yeah, sort of how I think is the best way to go about it. Once we're comfortable and you've got a training program and you're adhering to that training program in there, we then want to start thinking about the volume, intensity, and frequency that we're hitting certain muscle groups. So similarly, like if you're going to be doing, I was previously in the camp of doing quite a lot of volume. So like maybe 4 sets of 10 is quite typical, or 4 sets of 8, or 4 sets of 12. That's quite a lot of volume when you put that across several compound exercises. However, if you increase the volume too much by doing too many sets, then it's going to reduce the intensity. So my personal preference and what I've seen from my client results as well is to slightly reduce the volume. We're looking at maybe like 1 to 2 sets, working sets, and then actually we're going to really push ourselves to failure in those working sets. So that's going to drive the intensity to the absolute maximum. We're not going beyond failure. We're not doing excessive drop sets or excessive like partials or anything like that, but we're really taking ourselves to failure, so that the level of volume is not too high, but the intensity is absolutely up there. The reason why we want to focus when we do our training in making our intensity high is because we want to make sure that we are basically setting like a baseline measurement for us to and normalizing for intensity. So that means that we can then measure progress. So, for example, in 1 week, if you do bench press and you hit 60 kilos for like 8 reps, and that's like really close to failure, and then the next week, or maybe that isn't very close to failure, so maybe that was like quite an easy set, so maybe you had a couple more reps in the tank, and then the next week you're really close to failure, and then you go and hit an additional 2 reps. Actually, have you really progressed? Because in one session you wasn't training to failure, and in the other session you were training to failure. So therefore it's difficult to distinguish where the progress has actually been made. So that's why it's really important that we equalize for intensity by training to failure on every single set. And it can be a bit daunting when you first say that. And yes, definitely you'll get a lot of DOMs. However, once your body adapts to the recovery process, then you'll be absolutely fine. So yeah, definitely really important that we ramp up that intensity, have volume at a reasonable level, 1 to 2 sets per working per exercise, and typically I would go to sort of like between 10 to 12 exercises per session. I think as soon as you start to go much beyond that, it can then basically end up into sort of junk volume, which is basically unnecessary volume, which is not going to give you the most amount of benefit from that volume. In terms of frequency, I'd recommend like hitting your muscle groups probably twice per week where possible. So as I discussed there in my own split, at the minute with my training, I'm trying to focus on developing my upper body. So I'm hitting push twice, so that's chest, delts, arms, etc., all in there. And then I'm hitting pull twice, so that's all back is in there as well, twice. So lats, rhomboids, traps, rear delts, all that sort of stuff's being hit twice. And then legs I'm hitting once per week, but I'm hitting posterior then on a separate day. So I am still hitting my hamstrings twice because that's still an opportunity for me where I want to develop within my physique. But in terms of quad, yeah, I've only got one day in there for those. But we really ramp up the intensity on that one day, and then actually like yeah, you can still deliver a really good level of stimulus. And I've still managed to progress my legs on one session per week. It is slightly slower than doing 2 sessions per week, which is what I've done typically in my training history. But certainly now looking to develop my upper body, focusing on doing more than hitting the muscle groups twice per week. In terms of progression, so this is one of the really, really basic principles that we must adhere to if we are looking to progress our bodies in the gym. So the way I explain it to clients is that look, if we're wanting to build a physique which we've never built before, then we need to push ourselves to deliver in the gym what we've never done before. So the way we want to do that and the way we want to progress is that we want to be looking to add reps and or weights every single session where possible. So what that looks like in practice is you might have a training program that you'll look at, and it will say, okay, your repetition range we'll stick with bench press, if is 6 to 10. And on the first session, you go in there, you select a weight which you can do 6 to 10 reps in. So that might be 60 kilos. And then your first set, you go in there and you go, okay, I've done 7 reps. That pushed me close to failure. That was a really high intense set. Brilliant. A lot of ticks in the box there. Then you can log that in your training book, or like a training app, like a rep count, or I use OneFit personally. That's what all my clients use. And then you will refer back to that in your next session. So when you rotate your cycle around and you go to hit that same session, that same exercise, you look back in your training app, or the way you've logged it, and you go, okay, so I hit 60 kilos for 7. Now I'm going to look to hit 60 kilos for at least 8, if not 9, 10 maybe. So you're really looking to beat the logbook. That's kind of the phrase which the fitness industry uses. So you're looking to make sure you always beat that previous performance. And obviously that performance, as we've discussed, needs to be close to failure. And then the idea is then once you've reached the top of that rep range, so then you've got 60 kilos and you're like, yeah, I've done it for 10 reps. Brilliant. Next time you go in there, you then increase the load. So you add it to 62.5, or like maybe 65 if you're feeling a bit more ambitious. But generally, I would recommend doing like smaller incremental loads. Those little 1.25 plates will become your best friend, and they will deliver your physique for you much more than slapping on like pairs of 20s. So yeah, then you're on 62.5. So then you hit that for 6 reps, and then maybe next week you go and hit it for 7 reps, and then you keep running that up. So that is really, really important that we are logging our sessions, and we are training to failure, and we are looking to progress every single across every single exercise, every single session. And there will be sessions, to be transparent, where you don't do that, and that's absolutely fine. Like it's not like I guess riding a bike, or just it's not like that straightforward sometimes. Sometimes for whatever reason you try and nail everything, but actually you don't necessarily progress in that session. Look, don't stress about it. It's not the end of the world. You've still got a long training career ahead of you. This is we're trying to do here is we're trying to build healthy habits for life. So what we want to do in terms of there is just get straight back to it. Next week, next session, get back to it. Maybe consider the reasons why. Maybe it was sleep, nutrition, which we'll come on to. But there might be a reason why you didn't progress. But typically, we want to always be aiming for that progression, and we want to be beating the logbook. And that needs to be the mentality that we adopt going into every session. In terms of like exercise selection, this is again another sort of training principle which is really, really important. So we just want to be careful with what exercises we're choosing. So but generally speaking, as a general rule of thumb, we want to have a vertical press. So whether that's like a dumbbell press or like a shoulder press, we want like a horizontal press. I would recommend like an incline press. Typically it's normally safer on sort of shoulders, and also sort of targets the upper chest. So that could be like a dumbbell press or like a Smith machine press. We want and then we want to basically do the same for the back. So we want a vertical pull. So we want to pull like a lat pull down, in order, and that although it's called a lat pull down, it really targets like the upper back. So that's like a wide grip sort of pull here. Then you've also got a pull like a narrow grip pull, which is going to target a little bit more of your lower back development, like lower lat development. And then you've got the same principles then apply for like horizontal rowing. So you want to do like a high horizontal row where your elbows are flared outwards, and then you can do like a lower row, which is sort of more elbows are tucked in, pulling the attachment or the barbell closer to like your belly button and that sort of area. So that covers your push and your pull. Then in terms of like arms, I definitely would recommend at least sort of 2 exercises per session when you're going to be targeting your arms. Typically, we want to be don't want to overcomplicate it, but where possible, we want to be trying to do some exercises which are going to stretch out the bicep. So that's like if you're lying on like an incline bench and you're doing like a bicep curl, or like doing a behind the back cable curl, where you're basically lying on sitting upright on a bench and using a cable machine. Basically, where your upper arm is behind your rib cage, that will stretch your bicep. And then you want to be doing another exercise on your biceps where your arm is in front of your rib cage, which is like a preacher curl or like a high cable curl. So your arm is in front of your rib cage, and we're looking to get that muscle as short as possible. In terms of like legs, again, we want to have like a hip hinge in there. So you'd want to do like an RDL or something like that, like a dumbbell RDL or a barbell RDL. And then in terms of like glute development, you could either throw in like a back squat or preferably like maybe like a hip thrust, something like that in there. We also want to make sure we put in some isolation work for the legs. So we want to make sure that we've got some quad extensions in there, some hamstring curls, and then we obviously can't forget calves. Preference with calves for myself is always to go for like a straight leg calf exercise. That'll typically target your sort of your gastroc, which is the larger muscle, gastroc and soleus. So yeah, that pretty much covers the exercise selections. It's fairly straightforward. Most training plans that you can find online will cover a broad selection of exercises like that. But effectively, all those exercises do is they just target the functions of the body. So the push, pull, legs, hinge. These are all natural movements which you do, and that's basically what these exercises support. In terms of like rest periods, so again, it's something that I personally, when I take as long as I need to rest. So I think it's something that I'm not sitting there looking at my watch going, 59 seconds, 60 seconds, okay, I can go now. It's not something that how I train. I try and focus on more the fact that you're waiting till I feel like physiologically ready, and like even psychologically ready as well. Typically for like isolation exercises, I would suggest sort of 60 to 90 seconds roughly. And then for like compound exercises where you're targeting multiple muscle groups, like a RDL or a squat or like a shoulder press or maybe like a barbell sort of chest press, something like that, I would say sort of 90 seconds to 2 minutes, up to 3 minutes, to be honest, with some of the intensity that you can be reaching with those sets. Obviously, if we are training to failure, like I've suggested, then we want to make sure that we've got enough rest to get the most out of the next set that we're about to perform. Typically, what I'll see is clients that are inexperienced. They'll think, oh yeah, I only take like 45 seconds rest because then I can get in and out of the gym quickly, which is fine because they're getting the session in. However, we want to make sure that set that you're going to perform, you're ready to get the most out of that set possible, because that's the way that you're going to deliver the most efficiently, going to achieve the results that you're looking for in terms of building your physique. And then the tempo, the golden rule of tempo is just like a really controlled eccentric rep. So the eccentric is the lowering portion of the rep. So if you think about like a bicep curl, when you bring in the bicep or the dumbbell up to your face, that is the concentric portion, and then the eccentric portion is when you are lowering the bicep, or lowering the dumbbell, sorry, and stretching out the bicep. So that lowering portion of the movement, that is the most important part. General rule of thumb would be 2 to 3 seconds. So that's 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, just to be really clear about it, not 1, 2, 3, or when people try and rush it. The reason for that is we just want to make sure we've got full control over the muscle, over the weight, and we are stretching the muscle under load, and that is shown to give us the most amount of benefit from it. So, but as a rule of thumb, just nice, slow and controlled in terms of the tempo. So we've covered the progressive overload there, happy with that. So we talked about tracking progress there in terms of the rep count. So rep count is a free app, just to sort of emphasize how useful this can be. So there is a paid version as well. It's very low cost. It's I can't remember the exact price off the top of my head, but it is pretty low cost. Might be like a couple of £1 a month or so. But that I would really highly recommend that clients that are looking to, or anyone that's looking to get into their training, uses that app or an app like that, or even like a training diary to make sure that they can log all of that, so then they can refer back to it. And also there's another factor with this in terms of like the motivation, because when you see people go from like, when they look back in their logbook and they're like, okay, look, I'm seeing some good progress here, that fuels their motivation to go for their next sessions. Just to briefly touch on cardio as well. So it's something that some people go to the gym and they're looking to build their physiques. Maybe they're not informed about how to do that. You'll see them on the stairmaster, or you'll see them running for like over an hour, and you'll be like, oh, why aren't I building my physique? Well, you running and doing cardio doesn't give you the stimulus to grow muscle. So if your goal is muscle growth, then you need to prioritize spending time in the gym doing resistance training with weights or cables or machines, but really sort of working your muscles rather than doing cardio. I would suggest that you do like at least sort of like 20 minutes or so of cardio, maybe some hit and here and there. However, that's what I would suggest personally. Like, I don't do loads of cardio, certainly when I'm bulking. I struggle to squeeze it in terms of time. That's just an excuse. Let's be honest about it. But yeah, it's definitely something that is worth doing for overall heart health and longevity. But if you're looking to build your physique, then yeah, potentially one hit session a week and then one sort of like lower steady state session potentially is absolutely fine. Also important just to touch on the difference between cardio and steps, because this is something again that I find people get confused on. So people will go for maybe like a light walk or maybe like a run, and then obviously when you go for a run, that'll increase your step count because you're stepping effectively when you're running. But actually that's cardio. It's not steps. So just to be clear about that, so steps is basically what we would refer to as in fitness as an exercise which is a non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or it's NEAT, which is basically just burning calories but not exercising. So it's a tool that we can use to increase calorie expenditure without increasing fatigue. So it's something that we just need to keep like a baseline level of activity of around about, I'd say, at least 6k, maybe to 8. And then if we want to look for weight loss, we want to push that up to 10 or to 12k. So yeah, quite a lot of detail there to go through in training. Anything you want to add to that, Charlie?
No, I think you've been very thorough. Obviously, there is a lot to cover there, but it kind of gets a lot simpler over time. And one thing I'd really like to drill home to a lot of people is just don't overthink it. Just get yourself into the gym with a program. It's going to give you a starting point with exercises, training, volume, intensity, and it's just going to give you a feeler for the actual gym environment. And ultimately, like, just showing up is the first part. Like, you just got to actually get in the gym and do something, and then you'll figure it out along the way. Like, obviously, me and Jason, we've been doing this for a good few years. We started somewhere. We didn't know everything from day one, so you're going to make mistakes. You're going to trip up. You're going to do exercises wrong. You're probably going to overshoot volume. You're going to undershoot intensity. But as long as you're learning along the way, like we do it with our clients all the time, we talk through the training program. We guide them through different exercises and how to actually get the most out of their sessions. So yeah, just make it as easy as possible, track your lifts, and then just try to beat those week on week, but don't overthink it.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge as well that training is a skill. So it might be one of the more basic skills. It's not exactly, I don't know, playing golf or throwing darts or fencing or something, but it is a skill to be able to train your body to at a high level of intensity, to recognise when you're training to failure, to recognise what that looks like. And it's not something that you discover on day one, but it is something that you will build over time. So again, the most important point about training is your adherence to it. That's the number one point. So just make sure we get that first, and then start worrying about building up the intensity, building up the sets, and all that. So you can just get yourself in the gym, and then we can start to kind of work from there. So we need that adherence. Anything you want to go through in terms of sleep, Charlie?
Yeah, so the next pillar, or the building block of that hierarchy of gains, is sleep. It's not as glamorous as training. It's relatively boring, and it's just getting sleep. Why does it matter? But we live in a society, we are a generation that are sleep deprived. We don't focus on sleep. There's so many distractions. We've got TikTok, Instagram, my mic just nearly fell over, YouTube, you name it, there's a distraction for it, and everyone I speak to is sleep deprived to some extent. But I feel like I've got quite a lot of, not experience with sleep, because we're all experienced with sleep, we all sleep at some point, but actually making my sleep better. I've worked shift work, I've done night shifts, I've done the standard 8, 9 till 5. So I've had quite a varied sleep schedule across the years, and I've definitely got some tips and tricks to kind of help you along the way, but also like why is sleep important, how it affects your training, your recovery, nutrition, all that good stuff. So starting off, like, you need good quality sleep. Sleep is a superpower. And you obviously everyone has some good night's sleep, some not so good. you know when you've had a good night's sleep. You wake up, you feel refreshed, you're ready to go, you don't really need as much coffee to get started, and you just feel good. Whereas if you have a bad night's sleep, you're probably grumpy, you're a bit snappier with your partner, you don't want to get out of bed, you just want to stay wrapped up under the covers. And yeah, that's where sleep is most important, because days like that then have a knock-on effect on the rest of your day, your week. It affects your training, your nutrition, and just ultimately like your day-to-day function. So how can we go about improving that quality sleep? So the first thing is a consistent sleep schedule. Now, in an ideal world, we would get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Some people need more, some people can function on less. I wouldn't recommend it because it's not a fun place to be, but I would say 7, 7.5 as a minimum. Some people need 8, some people need 9. I probably function best off 7.5 to 8. But the most important thing, if you can't get that, is a consistent sleep and wake time. So going to bed at the same time, going to sleep at the that's the same thing. Waking up at the same time. Obviously, if you go to work, that's going to be relatively straightforward to wake up at the same time. But then, if you have like a Netflix film you want to finish, or there's a series that you're watching and it's just one more episode, that's going to change your sleep time, which is then going to have a knock-on effect on your sleep duration, going to have a knock-on effect on your sleep quality. You're then going to feel like you've slept poorly, and the rest of your day, the following day, is going to be poorly affected. So that is the main thing to focus on. Have a consistent sleep and wake time, and actually set yourself a bedtime. We give it for kids. There's no reason why we shouldn't give it for ourselves, because ultimately we're all just big kids and we need our beauty sleep. The next thing is sleep hygiene. So actually, making sure that your environment, I will get onto sleep environment soon, but like, your bedding, your bedroom, making sure your bedroom's not messy. Have you got fresh bedding? Is the lighting dark enough for you to actually sleep? Like if you sleep with the curtains open, that's probably going to lead to a poorer night's sleep, because there's light coming in through the window. There is light receptors in the skin, so even something as like the light from your TV in standby mode, that can disrupt your sleep. Obviously it might not seem significant, but over time it can have an effect. So yeah, things like your sleep hygiene and your pre-bed routine as well. If you have a time that you want to go to bed, start your nighttime routine, dim the lights, switch the TV off, read a book, whatever you do, just start that, and then have that as kind of your cue to get ready for bed, brushing your teeth, whatever it is. And obviously we do have some things that we can recommend to do before doing that, like in terms of food, fluids, that kind of stuff, which I'll get onto shortly. But sleep hygiene is very important. Do your research into it. Get an eye mask, some earplugs, whatever you need, and just a comfortable bed. Ultimately, some people probably haven't replaced their mattress in 10, 15 years, but you need a good mattress. You need some comfortable pillows. You need comfortable bedding and a duvet. If you're sleeping with the same pillow that you have been for the last 10, 15 years, get a new pillow. We all know the pillow I'm talking about, the yellow one that's stained with sweat and spit and the questionable bodily substances. Get rid of it. It's not nice. Get some new pillows.
I feel attacked.
Moving on. We've all got it. It's kind of a comfort thing at this point. But then sleep significance. So why is sleep important? So as I said, it obviously affects like your day-to-day function, but more specifically, it affects like your cognitive function and your decision making. So what is cognitive function? It's essentially your brain, so your ability to think on a day-to-day basis. You go to work, you might feel a bit foggy on the drive to work. I know I've had some drives to work or to the gym where I've basically been half asleep, and if you were to be like in a situation where you need to make a quick reaction, someone's cut you up, someone's pulled out on you, or I don't know, an animal's ran in front of your car, your ability to react to that is severely reduced. So your overall cognitive function and just your ability to make better decisions and just perform on a day-to-day basis is heavily reduced. So that's one reason why sleep is important, but also the decisions that you make throughout the day, they're going to be poorer decisions. So, if you're in an important meeting at work, if you're working a corporate job, whatever it is, you're not going to be able to perform to your highest level. So get some good sleep. That will all improve. It does also have an impact on your hormones, so we'll come on to nutrition section shortly, but I'm just going to kind of scan over it now. Ghrelin and leptin, they're your hunger and satiety hormones. They basically let your body know when you're full, when you're hungry, and that's then going to trigger you to obviously eat more food or not eat as much food, because that's pretty much what they do. If you've got poorer sleep, that's going to lead to increased levels of ghrelin, so you're going to be hungrier, you're going to want to eat more, and we all know when we've had poorer night's sleep, we do just have poorer decision making when it comes to food. You finish work, you want to go to the drive-through, you want to make that easy choice because you're hungry, and it's convenient. It comes down to that decision making. So yeah, it has a huge impact on your overall hormones, but also from a male perspective, it affects your levels of testosterone. So if you consistently have bad sleep, that's going to negatively impact your testosterone, which is then going to have a carryover effect into your training, and that's it's going to lead to poor gains eventually in the long run. Leading on from that, so how does it affect muscle growth? So sleep is ultimately a recovery tool. If you're not sleeping sufficiently, your body's not going to be able to recover enough. So let's say you do a heavy leg session on a Monday. If you get shit sleep from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you then come to train legs again on Thursday or Friday, your ability to perform in that session is going to be hindered by your poor sleep. Your body needs time to actually recover and repair those damaged cells and actually process that exercise, that stress that you've been under. So getting better sleep is going to allow you to actually recover from that exercise and then perform better in your following sessions. There is like the sleep exercise relationship, like they are, what's the word? They basically link in together. Like if you have good sleep, you're going to have good exercise. Poor sleep, poor exercise. There is a lot more around that. I feel like we can do a whole episode on each of these topics, but obviously this is just the basics. So we'll give you what you need to know, and then we will expand as necessary. And then just coming on to like the last point, like managing stress and cortisol levels. So they all kind of tie in together, but if you have poor sleep, you are going to react poorly to those stressful situations. Your cortisol levels are going to be increased, and cortisol is a stress hormone. As I said, it has a big impact on your hormones. So your ability to handle stressful situations, if someone's pissed you off at work or said something to you or cut you up or something, or if you go home and your partner's not done something you asked, they've not put the washing away, or something has happened, your reaction to that is going to be impaired by your poor sleep. So get better sleep, better hormones, better impact on training, and it's just going to lead to a better life. And then just coming off the back of that, creating like a sleep conducive environment. So I've already covered like your bed, your mattress, your duvet, your pillows, all that good stuff, but a dark room is essential. I've got a blackout blind. I literally turn all the lights off, so any lights from plugs or switches or TVs, that all gets turned off, because any light in the room, it leads to a darker room. Any light in the room leads to a lighter room overall, so if you switch them all off, it's going to lead to better sleep. It's going to create that dark environment. If you can't, or if you're a shift worker and you work night shifts, get an eye mask. That's something that I did a lot when I was working night shifts. My sleep routine, that's probably the best I've ever slept, just because I had a sleep mask, I had earplugs, I was spraying stuff up my nose to stop me getting congested. I still sleep with nasal strips. I take my mouth sometimes just so that my sleep is better overall, and I've definitely noticed an improvement in my sleep. So that comes onto the next point I was going to make. So nasal breathing, a lot of you might notice, if you are a mouth breather, you'll wake up, you've got a dry mouth, it's just not nice, and you're more likely to then be ill the following day. You might have a sore throat, a bit of a dry throat, whatever it is. So if you can put a nasal strip on, you're going to breathe through your nose a lot easier. It's going to make sleep a lot more comfortable, and then it's going to lead to that better quality sleep. I know sleep apnea is becoming more prominent in our society, so some people have to sleep with like full-on masks on their face to open up their airways, and that's just not a nice place to be. So if you can get a handle on that sooner rather than later, that's definitely going to be better overall. I feel like I covered the sleep environment, but like noise, if you live in a busy city like London, for example, I would definitely recommend getting some earplugs. You can get noise cancelling ones, you can get like a sleep mask that has ear things on it as well. You can play some music, whatever it is, and then if you can play like some rain sounds or something just to help you switch off before you go to sleep, that's also going to have a positive effect. I can currently hear some rain outside, and that is very soothing me right now, so that's probably going to help me get to sleep later. And then just kind of like a little rule for you to have leading into your sleep going forward. So it's called the 3-2-1 rule. So 3 hours before bed, no food. So let's say you go to bed at 10 p.m. If you cut off food at 7 p.m., that that's going to lead to better digestion. Your food is going to have more of a chance to be digested by the time you go to bed. It's going to lower your heart rate. If you are still digesting food when you go to bed, that's going to lead to an increased heart rate because your body needs to pump blood to the intestines to digest that food. Whereas if your food's already digested, it doesn't need to worry about that. Then also it's going to lead to blood sugar being reduced, and that is going to lead to a shorter time to fall asleep and better sleep quality. Whereas if you're still digesting food, or you've got something grumbling in your stomach, or you need to go and drop the kids off at the pool, that's going to lead to a longer time to fall asleep and ultimately poorer sleep quality. Then kind of leading on from that toilet comment, so 2 hours before bed, no fluids. I don't know about you, Jason, but I'm a very thirsty guy. I drink a lot, and I used to literally down like a pint of water before bed, and then also have a pint next to my bed and wake up in the middle of the night, down half this pint, but then at 4 or 5 a.m. I'm getting up to go to the toilet, and it's just not a nice place to be. So I've now cut that down massively to the point where I don't drink anything like 2 hours before bed as a minimum, sometimes 3 hours depending on if I'm thirsty or not. But having that cut off time just to stop drinking and eating is going to prevent you getting up in the night to go to the toilet and peeing. Less broken sleep, better sleep quality overall. And then 1 hour before bed, as I said, we live in a society where there's so many distractions, TikTok, Instagram, you name it. We're all scrolling on our phones, that blue light exposure. If you want to get some blue light blockers, you can. You don't have to. There is limited research on them, but I've noticed a benefit from wearing them. So yeah, 1 hour before bed, no screens. It's going to give you less stimulus. It's going to reduce your anxiety. Like if you're scrolling on Instagram and you see a news article about what's happening all over the world, whether there's a war or some news about something, or you've seen a post from a friend and you're then getting anxiety about that for whatever reason, it's going to lead to poorer sleep, because that's going to increase your heart rate and your brain is just going to be ticking away while you're trying to go to sleep. So less screen time, reduce your screen time, less stimulus, you're going to be calmer, lead to better sleep overall and better sleep quality. And then just the last one, so in terms of like tracking sleep, I have got into the cycle of tracking sleep, but then it negatively affected me. So you can track your sleep using Sleep Cycle or a sleep recorder, whatever you want to use. You've got Whoop, you've got Aura, whatever you use, you can use that just to get an idea of your sleep time, the time that you fall asleep, the time that you wake up, and also different stages of your sleep throughout the night. But it kind of helps you get a better understanding of your sleep pattern, but try not to let it dictate your entire life. So I got into the habit, I would have a really good night's sleep, I would then wake up, I'd feel great, but I'd then check the app and it'd say like my sleep quality was 60%, when in actual fact it felt like it was 90%. And I mentioned it to Jason, we've seen a lot of people experience the same with Whoop. It gives you kind of like a recovery score, or I don't know the exact metrics that they track, but a lot of people get really focused on the metrics that they give, and it kind of leads to poorer sleep overall, because you then go to bed and you're then worrying about your sleep score the next day, so that then leads to poorer sleep, and it's just this vicious cycle. You get a good sleep, you see your recovery score, leads to anxiety, leads to poor sleep, and it just round and round. So use it as a tool, but if you find that it's negatively affecting you, then take it out and get rid of it until you're able to process that a lot easier. That's pretty much everything for sleep, so I feel like I've covered quite a lot there, but if you've got anything to add, Jason, by all means fire away.
Yeah, I think some basic rules that works for me is just to consider, like, if I'm trying to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, then actually for me that's about 9 hours in bed. Typically takes me like 30 minutes to 45 minutes to actually fall asleep. So some people are like, oh yeah, I get 8 hours sleep every night. Well, actually they spend 8 hours in bed, but an hour of that's on the phone, just messing around, and then they take another half an hour to get to sleep. So actually it's only like 6.5 hours sleep that they're actually getting. So general rule of thumb that I would always recommend would be 9 hours in bed, not on your phone, equates to 8 hours of sleep. And that sounds quite extreme, but I think actually there's no like better investment of your time than just making sure you get that sleep, especially if you're looking to build good quality muscle, build your physique, just to improve like your cognitive performance, improve like your mood as well. Certainly, like I feel like the days, we touched on it in there already, but the days where I'm snappiest are the days when I've had least amount of sleep, or where my mental health's quite poor. Another thing I'll just touch on, sort of my experience, is I am incredibly light sensitive. So if there is any light on in the room, or even like the room next to it, I'm sure I can notice it, because I have to like have all light turned off and everywhere. And I'll go a step further than that. So I've tried eye masks. So I use like it was called like the Eye Master mask. It was actually recommended by Tim Ferriss in Tools of the Titans. It was out a book that was out years ago, but really good book. But I personally can't really get on with eye masks, so I just put a t-shirt on my head, which is a bit strange. But I always use like a black t-shirt and I put that on my head because I find like eye masks can be too like restrictive. They sort of like I'm just too conscious that they're on my face, and then they start to get quite warm, and then like it starts to sort of stress me out. So I'm an extremely sensitive sleeper. But yeah, so if you can't use an eye mask, just use like a black t-shirt, something like that you can put on your head. Is a little bit looser. Could also be like a bit more sort of comforting as well. So that's something to consider. In terms of like consistency of sleep pattern, so something that I've set up for this year is like time blocks. So like I've blocked out sleeping time. So unfortunately, I'm sacrificing my sleep right now for beyond reps, because according to my time block, it's about 8:30 is kind of like when I want to be heading towards bed. But definitely the pod comes first, so got to prioritize the pod. So yeah, that's something that I would recommend. You can literally just open up your calendar on like in your phone app, set like a weekly consistent sort of sleep time. Just get it to repeat itself. Do like a notification beforehand, because some nights you don't even realise, like you're just sat on your phone. Maybe you're watching Netflix or something like that, and then like time is just flying by, and you're like, oh shit, like I should have been asleep like an hour ago. So sounds really basic, but it's something that can add value. Is just blocking that length of time out. The only other thing I'd like to quickly touch on is just caffeine. We obviously caffeine is all over the internet at the minute. I'm sure you know it's talked about a lot. So I think 90% of the human population consumes caffeine on like a daily basis or like a weekly, somewhere in like the week. There's some ridiculous stats on that. Don't quote me, but it's definitely a high number of people. Obviously myself included, and I know you are as well, Charlie. So in terms of caffeine, yeah, the half-life of that is around about like 6 hours. I would say on average, can be a bit shorter depending on how you digest it. There's a lot of individual variability. All half-life means is basically how long it takes for half of that substance to be absorbed and removed from your body, removed from your bloodstream. So if you drink a coffee and the half-life is say 6 hours, then in 6 hours time, effectively half of that coffee, the caffeine in that, is going to be in your system. And then following another 6 hours, it will then be a quarter, and then eventually it will be removed. But yeah, so that's worth bearing in mind. So I would definitely recommend cutting caffeine out by my general rule of thumb is like 2 p.m. latest, but preferably like 1 o'clock or 12, and really try and limit that. Certainly don't have any caffeine like sort of beyond 2 p.m. if we can. If you need to go for a coffee, go for like a decaf. Charlie's got a decaffeinated Coke. Would you just hold that up for the camera? So he's got like a caffeine free. So there you go. He's absolutely rocking it, being the role model there. So yeah, that's something that you need to consider as well, as like stealth caffeine, which is like caffeine which is in Diet Coke. There's some foods have caffeine in as well, so just be conscious of that. But that's something that really can affect your sleep, both in terms of like you feel stimulated and you're awake, but actually also affecting like the sleep process that your brain goes through when you go to sleep. Just something to consider there. Anything else you want to add on sleep, Charlie, or I'll go on to nutrition?
No, I think we've covered quite a lot there. As I said, like each point could be an individual podcast on its own. So yeah, we're really just trying to give you the basics. So obviously there's quite a lot of information to take in, so try not to get overwhelmed by it. And if you can just do something, so even if that's just putting a t-shirt over your head to block out any light, or have that consistent sleep and wake time where you can, or just getting really strict with like your caffeine intake, whatever you can do, doing something is better than nothing in that situation. But yeah, let's move on to nutrition and see where we can go from there.
So nutrition, and some people will be like, well, why is nutrition third? Because some people are like, well, surely your nutrition needs to be in place before you start training, all that sort of stuff. And like the reason why nutrition is third is because your body will make progress if you just train and you just sleep. Because at some point across the day, you're going to be consuming some form of nutrients. It might be McDonald's chips, but they're still going to have some sort of calorific content in there, and your body will use that to adapt to the training stimulus that you're giving it. And that's often where we'll see with new clients who have just started their training, they'll go through like what's referred to kind of like as a newbie phase, which is like they're training, but because like they're so new to it, their body is just using any resource that it's got available to it. It's not necessarily optimal. There's a little bit of protein in there. There's probably too much carbs, too much fats, or even maybe too little calories. But basically, your body will just react to that stimulus, and therefore, you don't need to necessarily optimize every single macronutrient in there, because as long as you've got some sort of calories in there and some sort of macronutrients, you will make some adaptation. So that's why it's third and not first. That's why it's training, then sleep, and then nutrition. In terms of nutrition, so and what's really, I guess, the most important thing is if you're looking to build muscle, you're looking to add tissue, then you need to be in a calorie surplus. That is, and maybe certainly like if you're a more experienced lifter, you can generally go through like a bit of like what we would refer to as like a recomposition phase. If you're very new to it, which is basically where you would use the fat that you currently have on your body as the energy source while having like around about maintenance calories, which would be probably around about some 2,000 calories. Is obviously individually specific, but then we then want to work towards basically getting you into a calorie surplus when we can. Certainly for more experienced clients, we want to be in a calorie surplus. So that what that looks like is typically you want to aim to be in about a 300 calorie surplus. And it's like, well, how do we get into a calorie surplus? What does all that mean? So to bring it back down to the absolute basics, the easiest way to control your nutrition and to build and to recognize whether you're in energy balance or if you're in a calorie surplus is to start tracking your body weight. So typically what I would recommend for clients is they start tracking their body weight on a daily basis, which can sound quite obsessive to some people, can sound quite restrictive or like quite like hyper focused on that. However, that's kind of like your own sort of psychological connotations with that. But if you're healthy in the mind and you're happy to do that, I would really recommend you do that, because then if there's any unevenness in terms of like your timing of your meals, so for example, if you weigh yourself once a week, and you do that scale weight just prior to the day before you have like a really big meal, then suddenly you're going to see a massive jump in the scale weight just because there's a lot more food in your system. So actually that's not a fair representative scale weight that we've just measured there. So if you measure yourself every single day, or certainly at least sort of three times a week, or as consistently as you can, and that needs to be done ideally in the morning, either before or after you've been to the toilet, but prior to yourself having any sort of food in your system, so you're basically empty. Then we can kind of see if your body weight is trickling upwards, maybe by a few hundred grams a week, then that shows that you are in a slight calorie surplus. If your body weight is staying the same, then that shows that you are at energy balance. And then if it is dropping, then it shows that you're in a calorie deficit. So that's something that we want to work out first of all, is sort of where we are for body weight, if physique development is your goal. And then we want to sort of then look into what we refer to as macronutrients. So what are macronutrients? Really, really basic macronutrients are your carbohydrates, your fats, your protein. So those are the big three macronutrients in there as well. So carbohydrates really simply are what is used for your energy source. So that is your energy source for when you're in the gym, and that should be your primary macronutrient that you consume the most amount of. So typical examples would be anything like potatoes, rice, anything like that is considered sort of carbohydrates. Good clean sources are better rather than sort of highly processed foods as a general rule of thumb. So like white potatoes or like sweet potatoes are better than like McDonald's fries, which have obviously had a lot of oil in them. They've gone through a cooking process, etc. So that's carbohydrates. Things like your peanut butter, animal fats, whole milk, cheese, dairy. There's often quite a lot of fats in there as well. So typically we want to have some fats in the diet, but they don't want to take up a ridiculously large percentage. So you want to have fats in there mostly for like hormone health and just general health. But we don't want those to go too low, otherwise that can negatively affect your overall health. And then in terms of protein, protein is, as you would imagine, is your clean sources of meat, so beef, chicken, rice. There's also obviously like protein sort of snacks, if you will, like protein granola, protein bars, and that sort of stuff. Again, general rule of thumb would be to stay away from sort of ultra processed foods if possible. So if you're going to have like 80% of your diet to come from sort of raw foods or like foods which haven't been ultra processed, so we're talking like chicken breast that might have been diced with like a bit of seasoning on, that's really healthy compared to a chicken nugget, which has been, it's been mashed up. It's been put in like a big processing unit. It's got a lot of different additives in there as well. So we want to try and choose foods which are as close to as they would be in the environment. In terms of protein, so the key the key area for protein is obviously muscle recovery. It's used as the building blocks as the key stage 3 BTEC term probably, if I can remember that rightly. But it's basically the macronutrient which is used to build your muscle tissue, and it is literally what makes up the amino acids in protein make up your muscle. So that's something that we want to make sure we have in enough quantities as well. So in terms of working out like what your macros are, so I think that the best way to start doing that would be to start tracking your macros. If you've never done that before, then that can be a bit of a learning curve. So there is an app that I would recommend to use it, which is MyFitnessPal. No affiliation, obviously, but it is an app where basically it allows you to scan the barcode on the back of any source of like food that you can buy in a supermarket, and it will automatically pre-populate the app with the macronutrients for that food. You would select how many grams you are going to consume of that food, and then it would load that into an app. So then over the course of the day, if you track your foods, then at the end of the day you can then see, oh, I've consumed 200 grams of protein, maybe 400 grams of carbs, maybe 60 grams of fat, and that's X amount of calories, and then you can use that to compare against your body weight over the course of a week, and you can see that, okay, I'm in these 2,000, I can't remember the quick maths off the top of my head, but let's call it 2,800 calories. So if I'm on 2,800 calories and I consume that 7 days a week, and my body weight's going up, well, then I'm above energy balance and I'm in an energy surplus. So really, 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 really basic there, in terms of that's what you want to focus on. As a general rule of thumb for like protein, you want to focus on about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. It's about 1.6 or grams in terms of kilograms, I believe. It might be a little bit more, but you can work it out on Google. There's protein calculators, but very, very simple. Convert your body weight into pounds, whatever that may be, and then consume 1 gram per pound of body weight. That is probably a little bit over from compared to like, you can definitely make progress without consuming that much protein. However, I would always rather overcook it than undercook it, and certainly that's the guidance that I would give to clients as well, because if you do consume a little bit more protein, then you are just going to feel additionally satiated as well. It's something that's really important to note. So therefore it's going to prevent you from having so many hunger cravings and reduce the chance of you binge eating or going off plan, compared to the diet, which is then going to take you further away from your goals. In terms of fats, obviously it's client specific, but for myself personally, I would stick to sort of around about the minimum 50 up to maybe 60, 70 at the higher end of things, we don't really need to go too much higher than that. And then in terms of carbohydrates, so these are the ones that you really want to throw in quite a lot of carbohydrates for, especially on like training days. So you would want to, for me personally, again, I would be looking at like 350, 400, 450 grams of carbohydrates, in order to make sure that I've got enough fuel for my sessions. And basically, when we want to push ourselves into a calorie surplus, we would keep the fats and the carbs, the fats and the protein the same, and we would just push up carbohydrates most of the time, and then we can probably trickle up fats and protein a little bit as well, but primarily we're driving up carbohydrates because that's going to drive up training performance in the gym. And again, going back to the hierarchy of gains, which is definitely trademarked by Beyond Reps, that is the most important factor when it comes to delivering your physique goals. So the nutrition needs to support and facilitate your journey in the gym and your progression in the gym. So it's really, really important that we do nail this, that's why it's in the hierarchy of gains. But yeah, I also don't want you to necessarily stress about it so much initially at the start, and we want to nail the first 2 factors in there beforehand. We want to make sure we're into a calorie surplus, and another thing that you can also have a look at as well is like taking progress pictures. It's a little bit away from nutrition, but it's also a measure of like what sort of how is our physique changing? Are we gaining muscle? Are we gaining fat? And what's happening? So like I would also recommend that alongside your body weight scales that you're weighing yourself on a frequent basis. I'd say once a week, taking like check-in photos. That's what I'd recommend to all of my clients, and then we can use those to assess how you're progressing. So that's really, really important as well. And then obviously lots of clients come to us and they're looking to get into basically or become leaner or to like lose some body fat. And just to be clear, despite all the misinformation online, I am a huge fan of the calorie deficit, and that is the only way, like as in terms of like human physics, to lose fat or to lose body weight. Just a simple law of thermodynamics. You must be in a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. And if you, and all the other I guess charlatans might be quite a strong word, but all the other sort of misinformation out there, whether it's like fasting or whether it's certain diets or all this sort of stuff, like that they are all just tools that actually just cause a calorie deficit as the end result. Obviously, there's separate benefits to them, maybe psychological benefits and all that sort of stuff. But we're focusing here on physique development specifically, and we're focusing here on losing body fat, and that's driven through a calorie deficit. So certain diets, like the Atkinson's diet and stuff, will just deliver you a calorie deficit, similar to like a carnivore diet, because obviously carnivore diet you're going to be consuming a lot of protein. So that's going to make you feel very satiated, so therefore you're not going to eat so much other processed food. That's therefore is just going to lead you to consume less food overall, and therefore you're then going to get yourself into a calorie deficit. So all roads lead to a calorie deficit for weight loss. That's essentially the golden rule there. And we want to be in a calorie surplus to gain weight. We want to be in a calorie deficit if we're looking to lose body weight, just to be clear on that. What I would say as well, sort of as from my personal experience, having dieted for 2 shows, and obviously been pretty consistent with my diet overall, is that I'm pretty boring when it comes to food sources. I like food which is high in protein, easy to consume, easy to prep, can put it in a microwave. And yeah, tastes pretty good, but it's certainly foods, and it's pretty affordable as well. So like, I'm pretty basic like that. You'll never see me doing like a really fancy sort of like, here's what I eat today, and like a really fancy sort of like Buddha bowl or something like that. So my meals mostly, to be transparent, are sort of like some sort of chicken sauce. So I'll have like a chicken breast which is seasoned. You can use any sort of seasoning that your preference is. You're going to use like rice, typically as like a carbohydrate source. So use like sweet chili sauce on rice as well, and then talking about vegetables in there as well. So like some oven cooked vegetables, or some like frozen vegetables or something like that. So it's just really simple basic food, but it's clean. And then I keep that consistent, because I know that if I consume X amount of chicken breast, which I have every single day, then that is a certain amount of calories and a certain amount of protein, grams of protein, which therefore I know if I keep that consistent, then I will always achieve my goal. So typically when I recommend to clients about tracking their nutrition, we will sort of start off by them tracking it for like a week or 2 and kind of getting a bit more familiar with it. And then once you've got familiar with tracking your foods, then if you keep your foods pretty consistent, then generally like you don't have to be as methodical or obsessed with tracking your foods, because you're like, okay, so I'm going to eat the same meal for breakfast Monday to Friday, maybe the same meal for lunch, and maybe vary tea on like a Saturday or a Sunday. Then generally, and you can kind of see that actually, you're going to be achieving your protein target every single day, and you're going to be achieving your calories every single day, and that's reflected in the body weight scales moving up. So there's low-hanging fruit is what I would say. If you want to really focus on changing your physique, focus on controlling your calories to control your body weight, focus on increasing your protein to build your muscle, and then carbs and fats can vary around that. But yeah, that's probably what I would say, is keep it as consistent as you can with your nutrition and make sure that it works for you. Charlie, anything you want to add to that?
No, that was a very in-depth and very well put together overview of nutrition. I'm just going to come back to that whole routine thing that you just covered. We see it all the time. People come in and they're like, oh, have you got any recipes for fat loss? Can you, give me X recipe for this? And it's just like, no, just track what you're currently doing and track what you're currently eating. Because realistically, if we give you a recipe for fat loss, not that it exists, but if we give you a recipe book that's got 50 different ingredients that you don't typically buy, you don't know how to cook, and you don't know how to actually make it off the top of your head, that is a lot of resistance. So that routine and that consistency is key to adherence, and similar to training, adherence is the number one thing to progress, really. So if you can't adhere to it, then it's not going to work. So one method that I find quite useful in terms of that routine and that consistency, we are creatures of habit, we are creatures of routine, we like similar things, and typically we fall back onto the same things for breakfast and lunch, and we deviate to the similar foods. So I keep breakfast and lunch similar pretty much every day. It might deviate on the odd day. I might have protein oats one day, I might have chicken sausages, bacon, an egg bagel, whatever you want to have, but it typically stays the same week to week. That's then the same for lunch, and I might have like my evening meal that varies, but then leftovers from that will then be my lunch the next day. And it is just that case of keeping it consistent. So have like breakfast, lunch, and a snack that stay the same every day. If you want to try a new recipe, if you want to go out to eat, you then have that flexibility for your evening meal, but that consistency with your earlier meals just helps you be more routine and more consistent, which ultimately leads to better adherence in the long run. But yeah, I feel like we've covered quite a lot there. But ultimately, if you do the above three well, sleep, training, nutrition, there's no point doing anything more if you can't do those well. So, we get it all the time. People are like, oh, what supplement should I take for this? Should I take this? Should I buy this? And it's just not necessary, because chances are your nutrition's dog shit, your training is mediocre, your sleep is non-existent, you're getting 5 hours of sleep a night. So focus on your training, focus on your sleep, keep nutrition dialed in, and you will make progress. And that kind of brings us on to the next subtopic. Like, those three are the main components. Then we've got things like supplements and stress management. So supplements, they're not necessary to start off with. Like, they're just not. They can add a benefit. There are some things we would recommend more than others. So just off the top of my head, creatine, vitamin D, omega-3s, and a multivitamin. Some whey protein you could probably throw in there if you can't get all of your protein from your food. But creatine is one of the most research-backed supplements out there to help your training performance, so there's no reason why you shouldn't take it, really. But if you can't afford it, don't buy it. Vitamin D, particularly if you're in the UK, we are a sun-deprived country, so yeah, absolutely supplement with some vitamin D. And omega-3 multivitamin, they are useful if you can't get those things from your foods, but yeah, they're not essential. So if you want to buy them, you absolutely can. And then, just as a kind of whey protein, a lot of people think it's something special. You take whey protein, it's going to lead to you 10xing your gains. You're going to be like Chris Bumstead in 2 weeks. It's not going to happen. It's literally just a powdered form of chicken breast. Like, that's essentially how I present it to clients. It's just a very easy, cheap, convenient way to get your protein in. One scoop is like 20-30 grams depending on the brand that you buy. It's very easy to get your protein in. You can mix it with milk, you can mix it with water, you can mix it into certain foods, and it's very convenient. As I said, that's all it is. In terms of like pointless supplements, ones that you don't really need to buy, particularly ones that are overpriced, AG1 comes to mind. So I did have a client ask me this a few weeks ago, and it's just not worth it. Both Jason and I have had experiences with it. We didn't really notice a benefit. I only did it for 30 days. I think Jason did it for 3 months. Is that correct? Yeah, so 3 months. And yeah, we just didn't notice the benefit, and considering the price point they charge, it's just not worth the investment. So make sure your nutrition's consistent, and then maybe look at the supplements like the creatine, the protein powders, stuff like that. In terms of brands that you can go towards, both Jason and I buy stuff from Bulk, formerly known as Bulk Powders. I get my whey from Perform, PER4M. That's a relatively good quality whey protein. It digests well, it tastes good, and yeah, it works for me. Brands to kind of avoid, if it's not advertised and it's not like mainstream, it's probably pretty shit. Like, if you go to B&M or Home Bargains, the brands in there, they're not going to be the best quality. They're going to lead to some digestive upset. I've had experience with my protein in the past. Their protein just doesn't sit well with my stomach. It leads to the infamous protein farts, and it's not a nice time. If you do have a partner and you consume my protein products, that they're not going to be very happy with you. So be wary of the brands that you're buying. Go to like a well-known supplement brand. Obviously my protein is, it's just not good quality, so actually put some effort into it if you're going to buy them. Don't just throw your money at anything, and actually invest in good quality products. Anything you have to add on to that one, Jason?
Yeah, so I just I expanded on the AG1 point a little bit as well. So yeah, as Charlie said, so I tried AG1 for 90 days. I didn't really feel a huge benefit. I think the price tag at the time was £75 per month for a bag. So you are paying like top dollar for it, really, and yeah, it didn't really feel like there was a huge benefit to that. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of any other supplements that are in there as well. I'd say creatine just as a benefit in terms of how I take creatine. So I take 1 gram per 10 kilograms of body weight. So for me, I weigh just over 90 kilos. So I like to round up to 10 grams just for additional gains. But again, it's not something that's going to blow you up overnight. It will improve your training performance. It is very well scientifically backed. You can look online separately to see a lot of the literature about it. So that is something that I would really encourage. But yeah, I think we could probably do a further episode on supplements. But again, just to reiterate the point that Charlie said, focus on the big three: your training, your sleep, and your nutrition, and worry about supplements afterwards. They're going to give you like the last 1 or 2% maybe in your journey, and they're not going to deliver you the 90% that the big three will. I'll go on to stress management. So this is the last topic that we've got to run through. So again, it's going to be quite brief. So I think, yeah, it can obviously impact you. Your sleep's probably the biggest one, is what I would say. And probably can potentially impact your nutrition and maybe even your training as well. So it definitely has an impact on all of them. Obviously, if we're feeling really anxious at night and we're struggling to manage stress throughout the day, then yeah, that's something that we need to bear in mind. I don't want to go into too much detail with it now, because I don't think it's as important as the big three like we want them to aim this podcast on. But I'll just talk from my experience in terms of like what's worked well for me. And I wouldn't say I'm someone that struggles with anxiety all the time, but I'm definitely someone that can sometimes have things that play on my mind. So I recently bought a tool called like Mind Journal. So it's just like a journaling sort of book, where basically you can, I think Charlie's actually got one. Charlie, do you want to hold one up for the camera just so the people can see? There we go. So that's what it looks like. He's doing a lovely demonstration there. So it's literally just like a journal there, which basically has like a framework of like a daily check-in with yourself. Just kind of asks you how you're feeling, asks you sort of like you feeling happy, calm, etc., anxious, worried. Also asks you sort of like what your goals are for the day and what you're grateful for, and just as like a pretty simple tool, and it's probably a little bit of recency bias. It's not something that that I've been using for very long, but I definitely feel like it's there when I need it. So if I've got something that's really playing on my mind, I can quickly put it down, write it down as a note, and that's something that has definitely helped me, and it also sort of helps me structure my day as well. So say I'm, for example, on day off, or maybe I want to get some check-ins completed, or I've got some objective that's really important to me for that day, then I will use like Mind Journal as a tool for that. In terms of stress management outside of that as well, in terms of like recovery, I guess it kind of links to as well, in terms of like physiological stress, that probably links back to sort of the training and sleep that we talked about earlier. So if you're overtraining, which is very unlikely to be doing, to be fair, if you're only training 5 times a week, so that allows you to have 2 additional rest days in there, to make sure then that you feel like you're fully recovered. And then you can also look at breath work. Look, I'm no breath work expert, so you can definitely go online and find someone who's much better for it than me. But generally, if you exhale longer than you inhale, then you will slow your heart rate down, and that will calm you. But if you like repeatedly inhale, so maybe if you're looking to get yourself psyched up in the gym, do repeated short inhalations. That will increase your heart rate, and therefore that might help you focus in the gym. But typically, like if you want to focus on a long extended exhale, then that's something that you can use as well to calm yourself down. Andrew Huberman has many protocols on this. Again, you can go on his Huberman Lab website, you can search in breath work, and he's got some like non-sleep deep rest ones, I think, which are quite useful if you're feeling quite anxious and struggling to sleep. But yeah, there's lots and lots of tools out there that you can use. There's obviously the app Mind as well, which I haven't used personally, but I've had some people that have used it. And also, again, linking back to sleep, some people like to sleep with the rain outside, which obviously Charlie sounds like he likes to do. I like to do that as well personally, so that kind of helps calm me down. So yeah, there's lots of different techniques that you can employ. In terms of the one that I use, so I use like Mind Journal, and generally like just talking to your partner, talking to other people, that kind of what's on your mind, and kind of just expressing that. So that's something that I would consider as well in terms of how you manage that. Anything you want to add to that, Charlie?
No, I feel like you covered it quite well. I think a lot of people are notoriously bad at managing stress. I guess it just comes down to that communication thing, as you said. Like if you are experiencing stress, then talk to someone, even if it's just like in a jokey way with your mates, like, oh, my boss said X, my partner said Y. Obviously, if you've got problems with your partner, then go straight to your partner. But yeah, like you need to find a way that works for you. Breath work might work for some of you, it might not work for all of you. As Jason said, he's got Mind Journal. I have it. I haven't used it for a while because it just stopped working, but it's there for when I need it. And I've done the breath work. It does help you feel relaxed in the moment, even if it's not like a full 20-minute breath work session, just a quick 5 minutes inhaling, exhaling. There's like this it's essentially box breathing, so 4 seconds in, 4 second hold, 4 seconds out, 4 second hold. That can be quite useful to use throughout the day as well, just to help regulate yourself and bring you back to a calmer state. So if someone's said something at work, or your boss has dumped a load of work on your desk, you can just kind of use that to recenter yourself and help you manage that stress in that situation. But yeah, I feel like we've covered that in its basic form. And obviously, as we said, any further episodes we can expand further.
Okay, so we'll just summarise then. So I guess as we've gone through in terms of the main points for this is nailing your big three. That's your training, your nutrition, your sleep, and then focus on optimizing sessions. In terms of training, just real basic takeaways is get consistent, train intensely, and then train if you want to build certain muscle groups. Then train them at least twice a week. In terms of sleep, I would suggest 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep, so that's 9 hours in bed, like we discussed. Limit caffeine and the timing of caffeine to try and bring that to around about the 2 p.m. cutoff at the latest, and try and really focus on getting that consistent sleep time. And then in terms of nutrition, just to boil it down to the absolute basics of building muscle, so a gram of protein per pound of body weight. If you want to build muscle, then get yourself into a calorie surplus. If you want to lose body fat or reduce sort of like weight or like lean down, then you want to be yourself in a calorie deficit. Take pictures as well as tracking your nutrition to see the direction that you're heading in, and take your body weight on a regular basis. I would suggest every day if possible, but certainly probably about 3 times a week. But I think it's really important just to reiterate now that doing something is better than nothing. So that's why we've tried to boil it down to the absolute basics. But don't stress about I haven't got in my full session today. A shorter session is better than no session at all. And then we just want to try and make it as clear as possible as we can with this podcast today, and cover the absolute basics, so that when you go out into the world and you look at your Instagram and you see all sorts of influencers trying to hijack the limbic system, I think it's referred to, or to basically try and get you to click and react to their stories or their reels. Actually just try and think back to hopefully this podcast, and you'll think that actually, is this some of the basics? Am I nailing all of these? Because nailing these will simply give you at least 90% of the result which you want. So there's no point following some silly advice from an influencer who's trying to get you to buy their ebook or something like that, when actually you haven't nailed the big three first.
Yeah, spot on. I feel like we can wrap up there. As Jason said, just make it as easy as possible. Do something. Just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you can't do anything. So if you can't get your steps in, if you can't get your training session in, if you can't be consistent with your nutrition, can you do one of those things? If you've had a busy day at work and your nutrition's gone to shit, can you still go outside and get your steps in? Can you wrap up the day with a training session to help you manage stress a little bit better? Whatever you're doing, just try to do it well. And if you can't do everything, just do something. And yeah, that is the end of the pod. So make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe, share it with your mum, your dad, your nan, whoever. And yeah, we will see you for the next episode.
Awesome, guys. Peace.